My friend's girlfriend had a panic attack because of my name. I had a small group of friends who decided to have a game night at my house. My friend Nick asked me if he could bring his new girlfriend, Pan. I said yes, since none of us had met her yet. They had been dating for 3 months, so it seemed like the perfect time to introduce her to the group. The night arrived, and Nick and Pan were the last to show up. She greeted everyone, and Nick introduced me. I welcomed her into my home and introduced myself with my full name. She fell silent and asked me to repeat it. I found it a bit strange but said my name again. A fake name for this example. Let's say, Andre Gimmins Manso. She screamed and collapsed to her knees. Nick immediately tried to console and calm her down. It turns out she has a fear of serial killers, and I share the last name of one of the killers in the state where I live because, unfortunately, I'm also distantly related to him. It wasn't a highly publicized case, but it was well known enough locally that some people wondered if I had any connection to him. This is pretty heavy information, so I don't usually tell everyone. My friends already knew about it, but Pan didn't. Nick said she would be fine in a moment, but then she screamed, "How could you bring me here, monster?" I found this very out of line, so I asked what was wrong. She said that her great-aunt was one of the victims and that the body was never found. I told her I was very sorry, but there was nothing I could do about it. That's when I lost my patience and kicked her out. I'm related to Charles Manson, again, that's not the real name, but that doesn't mean I'm going to eliminate someone like he did. Then, she screamed that I should leave, and Nick told me to step out until she calmed down. That's when I snapped and said that this was my house, so they should leave instead. He asked me to be reasonable and understanding because it was something very difficult for Pan to overcome. But here's where I might have been the jerk. I grabbed my keys from the kitchen, and as I walked through the living room, I heard Pan saying, "I can't believe you brought me to a killer's house." That's when I exploded. I shouted that she had a lot of nerve acting that way the first time we met, and how she dared to demand that I leave my own house and call me a killer. I grabbed her and Nick's belongings, threw them outside, and demanded that they leave immediately. She kept screaming and crying, and Nick asked me to be reasonable. I told him to go to hell if he thought it was okay for his girlfriend to insult me like that. After kicking them out, our other friends started arguing about how I could be so harsh on someone who was having a panic attack. Others defended me, saying that Pan had crossed the line and that Nick did nothing to stand up for his friend against his 3-month girlfriend. They felt it was her fault for overreacting and being so demanding because of a panic attack, and that Nick was just enabling her behavior. Nick demanded an apology for Pan and for himself, and I said that wasn't going to happen after the way she disrespected me. The petty side of me started calling my house the murder house in the group chat with the friends who supported me. I think the name is going to stick. After that night, I thought things might settle down. After all, Pan and Nick had already left my house, and I had made it clear that there would be no apologies. But, as with any situation involving friend groups, things weren't that simple. The next day, the friend group started splitting even more, and the drama only escalated. Nick stopped talking to me directly but started messaging the group, trying to turn some people against me. He posted something like, "Man, I don't know how you guys can support someone who kicked out a woman having a panic attack. That's not just insensitive, it's cruel." That made me furious. I was already pissed off about how he handled the situation at my house, and now he was trying to make me look like a monster in the group. Some friends, as expected, started taking sides. One of the guys, Daniel, immediately replied, "Nick, I think you're overreacting. Pan was completely out of control, and you, as her boyfriend, should have done more to calm her down. It wasn't fair to expect the host to leave his own house because of this." Others stayed silent, but I knew this wasn't over. Pan, on the other hand, wasn't satisfied with letting the situation go. She got the numbers of some of the other girlfriends in the group and started sending them private messages. I didn't know what she was saying, but I began noticing some distance. Some people who used to message me frequently were now colder and more distant. Then, one of my friends, Clara, sent me a screenshot of a message Pan had sent to Daniel's girlfriend. Pan was basically painting me as a psychopath, claiming that I had threatened people in the past because of my family history. That was the last straw. I had no idea where Pan got that idea from, but it was clear she was trying to destroy my reputation. I grabbed my phone and called Nick, determined to settle this once and for all. He didn't answer. I tried texting him, and all I got back was, "I'm not in the mood to talk right now. Maybe you should reflect on what you did." It was obvious that Pan was manipulating the situation, and Nick was blindly taking her side. I decided that if he didn't want to handle this like an adult, I wasn't going to sit back and do nothing either. I decided to expose everything that was happening in our friend group. I sent a long message explaining the whole story from the beginning: the panic attack, Pan's behavior, and her lies. I was clear and direct, stating that I wouldn't tolerate anyone making up false accusations about me. I explained that I had never threatened anyone and that Pan was exploiting her past trauma to paint me as a villain. The response was immediate. Some people were shocked by the accusations, while others didn't know who to believe. That's when Clara, who had already sent me Pan's private messages, stepped in. "Guys, I don't know if you realize this, but Pan has been sending private messages to several people in the group, making up stories about his past. This is unacceptable." That turned the group chat into chaos. Some people sided with me, while others started questioning whether I was really telling the truth. Of course, Nick didn't say a word. He just left the group chat. By that point, the situation was already spiraling. I found out that Pan was spreading her version of the story in other circles, trying to defame me on social media. She posted something like, "Be careful who you call a friend. Some people have dark secrets you wouldn't even imagine." That was too much. I knew I had to take serious action to protect myself. I consulted a lawyer and explained the situation. He told me I had grounds for a defamation lawsuit, especially if she continued spreading lies. I didn't want things to go that far, but Pan wasn't leaving me much choice. I warned our group of friends that if Pan didn't stop, I would take legal action. The most surprising response came from Nick. After a few days, he finally messaged me. He said he was overwhelmed and that Pan wasn't doing well. Apparently, she had been having constant breakdowns since that night, and he asked me to reconsider suing her because it would only make things worse. Nick seemed more worried about Pan's emotional state than the truth. I felt betrayed, but I also knew I had to protect myself. My response was firm. I told him I was sorry Pan was going through this, but she brought it on herself by spreading lies about me. If he wanted to stay by her side, that was his choice, but I wasn't going to let her paranoia ruin my reputation. I made it clear that, from that moment on, my lawyer would handle everything. Nick never replied again, and I started distancing myself from the friends who still stuck by him. Some supported me, saying I was right and that Pan had taken things too far. But others seemed uncomfortable with the idea of taking sides. Weeks passed, and things finally started to cool down. Pan and Nick never showed up at any more gatherings, and her nasty posts vanished from social media. I guess the lawsuit threat worked. However, our friend group was never the same again. That sense of unity and trust was gone. The most ironic part of all this? The nickname Murder House actually stuck. Every time we have a new gathering at my place, someone ends up mentioning the name as a joke. I won't lie, I laugh about it sometimes. But deep down, the bitter taste of betrayal still lingers. After a few weeks, I started noticing something strange. The Murder House nickname, which had started as an inside joke among my closest friends, was beginning to spread. Friends of friends started asking if the story was true. It seemed like the idea that my house had some kind of eerie connection to a serial killer was fueling people's imaginations. At first, I found it annoying, but after a while, I started to see the potential. I needed a way to turn this situation to my advantage instead of letting it consume me. That's when the idea hit me. If people wanted to believe my house had something sinister about it, why not use that to my benefit? I decided to turn my house into a horror-themed attraction. After all, if people were so interested in mysteries and eerie stories, I could create an authentic experience that fueled their curiosity. I started slowly, making small renovations to give the house a darker look, adding lighting effects and the right decorations. I found a group of local actors interested in participating. Together, we put together an immersive haunted house experience. I placed ads on social media and local tourism websites, offering guided tours and nighttime themed events. The idea was simple: create a fictional narrative around the house's dark past, blending real facts with urban legends I made up myself. To my surprise, the response was overwhelming. Soon, curious visitors, horror fans, and even tourists from out of town started showing up. The murder house became a sensation. People loved the chilling experience, and our horror nights quickly sold out. Word of mouth spread, and my house gained fame not just locally but in other regions as well. Social media was flooded with posts from visitors sharing their terrifying experiences. Every month, more and more people came, and I quickly realized that what started as a joke had become a profitable business. I opened a small souvenir shop next door, selling t-shirts, mugs, and even custom haunted items. The success was so huge that I started partnering with influencers and content creators, who came to film videos and promote the murder house even more. Within a year, the project was generating a stable and solid income. I had turned a stressful situation into a unique opportunity. But, as always, when things start going well, problems resurface. Nick and Pan, who had distanced themselves and were among those who helped spread the initial lies, began to feel bitter about my success. Some of the friends who sided with them also started speaking up. They argued that, in some way, they had contributed to the house's fame and deserved a share of the profits. Of course, I ignored them. They had done nothing but cause problems from the beginning. Then, the messages started coming. Nick, backed by Pan, sent me a formal email demanding that I acknowledge their contribution to the house's popularity, claiming that I would never have succeeded without them. They demanded a percentage of the profits or threatened to sue me for using their story without authorization. I laughed at their ridiculous extortion attempt, but I knew they weren't bluffing. Days later, I received a court summons. They had actually sued me, claiming that the house's initial fame only existed because of the incident between Pan and me, and that they were entitled to financial compensation. My lawyer, the same one who helped me before, chuckled when he saw the lawsuit. "This won't last long in court," he said confidently. And he was right. When we went to trial, the judge quickly dismissed Nick and Pan's claims, stating that they had no legal grounds. To make matters worse for them, the judge ruled that since their lawsuit was a waste of time, they would have to pay court costs and a fine for bad faith litigation. In the end, they ended up owing me money instead of the other way around. The look of rage on Nick and Pan's faces when they heard the verdict was priceless. They stormed out of the courtroom furious, and I later heard from mutual friends that they were completely financially ruined. The money they spent trying to sue me only buried them deeper in debt, and the fine made things even worse. Meanwhile, I moved on with my life. The haunted house business continued to grow, and I started expanding the concept to other cities, creating horror-themed experiences in historical locations with dark pasts. My focus was entirely on embracing success and growing my business. In the end, all the chaos with Nick and Pan turned out to be a blessing in disguise. If not for them, I might never have come up with the idea to turn my house into an attraction. And now, while they dealt with the consequences of their own actions, I was focused on new projects, building something bigger and better. I could have stayed angry or resentful about everything that happened, but honestly, I was more than happy to leave the past behind. After all, I was in a new chapter, one filled with success and opportunities. Nick and Pan were nothing more than a footnote in a story that, ironically, ended up benefiting me in ways I never could have imagined.